Is it of Tim?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you can tell
Well,
us about
Tim.
the story about your connection and everything about
Yeah, yeah,
him.
yeah. Well, elephants have been since when I was a child. Of all the African animals, probably elephants were my favorites. I was completely obsessed by elephants when I was a child, and so that obviously carried on when I moved here. Although in the meantime, I became very interested in the cats as well. So that's in the Mara. My main focus had probably been cats. But in Amboseli, which is a beautiful national park in the southern of Kenya, almost at the border with Tanzania, at the base of Kilimanjaro. It's a fantastic place. There's a very nice elephant population, which includes some of the last great tuskers, elephants with very huge, very big tusks. And the biggest of them all was this elephant that we see here, who was called Tim. Unfortunately, we are talking in the past because in February 2020, Tim died of natural causes for a disease related to old age. He was 51 years old, and so he was quite old for an elephant, for a wild elephant bull. And but I was lucky enough to see him and follow him extensively from 2010 to 2020. I first saw him one morning in 2010 when he was coming out among in a herd of about 200 or 300 elephants. And when I saw him with this fantastic tusk, and he was coming closer and closer and closer, and it was just, the sight was just unbelievable. And he was a very gentle elephant, very, very tame, absolutely relaxed. He would never charge, never show any sign of aggression. It was a super sweet elephant. And he was, by the time he died, so yeah, when he was 50, he was the reference, kind of the old wise elephant for the whole population. So a lot of elephants came or lived around, a lot of especially bulls, younger bulls lived around him, came with him to stay with him, to learn his ways, to learn where he would find food, to learn how to keep safe from him. So that shows the importance of these old members of a population of elephants and of any animal in general. And obviously, needless to say, when the news came that he had died, was shocking, was horrible. He's left a big void. But at the same time, we can console in the fact that he died of old age, or he died of natural causes. So that's not something that humans provoked. He was very well looked after. The elephants in Amboseli are still very well looked after, and so we already are seeing new elephants coming up with large tusks. The population is flourishing, especially this year. There's been amazing rain, so the population is flourishing. So his genes, he's the elephant who has mated the most in the last 10 years, fortunately. So his genes will have been carried on in the baby elephants that we can see now in Amboseli. So that's he's probably the creature I've become most connected with of all the ones that I've seen. It was such an amazing. You remember, Tinman, when we saw him with the other big tusker? I kind of lost a bit of. I didn't really I didn't really give my best photography because I was so taken up by the emotion of seeing this team and the other biggest tusker of Amboseli together. Was an unbelievable encounter, amazing.
Well, I was actually embarrassed to say, because before I came to Africa, I thought an elephant was an elephant was an elephant. But after I saw Tim, because like I was just overwhelmed by their big size, so I never really pay attention to like how big the tusker is and how that makes the difference. But when I saw Tim, right, with the tusker basically hanging off the ground, and then every other elephants I saw probably have. 1/3 of the length of the tusker, and I saw that like the whole this the elephant, exactly as what you mentioned. He was so calm. It's almost like,
Yeah,
when you saw him, you felt the calmness inside you, as if like he
inside
doesn't
you.
care
Yeah.
about the world. It's like this whole world, he just look at it through his eyes, but he wouldn't care less. And I think for us human, we should also think about like with this kind of mindset, right? Just like enjoy ourselves, have a relaxing time. Just like it just made me kept thinking about that, which is
Yes.
amazing. Yeah,
The presence of these old bulls is
yeah,
really is calming. You can really feel the soul in where around them. You can really feel their charisma coming through you and taking over. Yeah, I totally
yeah.
share that.
Yeah, and let me show people, the audience, one photo that I really like. At first, I mean, I love all your elephant photo, but last time when I look at that one, it just make me kept looking, which is the low angle elephant one.
Yeah.
So this one is so I just show you show people the one with the elephant walking, and the picture has on the left you see the elephant against the horizon, and then from the further it almost become like those clip art with the shape of the elephant further and further away, and then you realize that like, oh my God, like I've never seen so many elephant. Like you see 3 or 4 elephant is considered quite a lot nowadays, right? But in this photo, right? And can you like describe like how this was taken, and what it means to you? Because I don't know. When I kept looking, it is so interesting about the whole texture, about the pattern and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. It's this image was taken again in Amboseli. In the northwest of Amboseli, there is a dry lake it's called Amboseli Lake. It's a lake that is dry most of the time. Now is very wet because of all the rains that we had. Now is a full lake with water. So now is nothing as you can see here. But when it's dry, it's just more than 100 square kilometers of completely flat, cracked soil cracked by the sun. And the elephants and the other animals, giraffes, zebras, wildebeest, sometimes cross it to get from the feeding grounds, from the woodland where they feed on the other side of the lake, to the water holes at the heart of the park, which in the dry season is the only place where they can find water. So that this walk for the elephant takes about an hour and a half of walking through this stark, extremely ghostly place. In this situation, it was a late afternoon. The elephants were going away from the park. I pulled up and I saw this huge group of elephants, but there were 3 families actually. This group is made up of 3 families, and that's why they are at different sizes, because all of them are at a different distance. So I accompanied them on their walk, and there's so many images that you can take in such a situation. But for this one, I went completely on the ground, lying, not really lying. I don't go out of the car, but it's just taken with the low angle, right angle viewer to have the camera right on the ground, and to have the elephants silhouetted into the sky. The clouds really fill up the sky, so they're a fundamental element in this image and in many of these kinds of images. But there is sunrise, there is sunlight, not really sun, but before sunset, when there is on the horizon, you can see the brightness when there are no clouds, and just before the sun breaks below the clouds. So that's what the white on the horizon that we see is. So the elephants are silhouetted very nicely into this white layer between the soil and the clouds. And fortunately, they were in a position where the 3 families were at different distances, but all perfectly lined up
There's
to
almost
create.
no overlap. Yeah.
Yeah, there are about 40 elephants, I guess. I haven't counted them, but we could easily count them. It would. So it's sometimes you find one family. Sometimes the biggest number I've seen walking across together was 70. 70 elephants together.
Wow.
But in elephants population, in certain seasons, especially after the rains, when there is abundant food, elephants are very social animals. So they tend to come together. Even different families might come together to form larger kind of extended family gatherings. So so sometimes you see groups of 300, 400 elephants in Amboseli and Savo, even in the Mara. But mostly in Amboseli and Savo. In the right season, you can find groups of 200 or 300, 400 sometimes. It's just an unbelievable. You can't photograph it because there's so many that if you go wide, they become just tiny dots, and it's a very challenging photograph to take. So, but it's a fascinating thing to see.
And I wanted to point to the audience that a lot of the elephant photos that you saw. Like wide angle or close up of the elephant, of the texture and all. But for this one, Federico just go against all the common belief to make the elephant actually look like tiny little thing in the whole grand landscape. So you know how crazy this photo really means to us human, because like who would be able to ever even see that many elephants all together in this? I was with Federico when we went to this lake, and we just saw one family crossing, and my heart was jumping up. It was just such a crazy scene that moves me. And now consider there are 3 families going together. And from this photo, right, you see the interesting point is, the sizes of the elephant just lead your eyes further and further away, and then all the way into this distant mountain, right? So this created such a 3-dimensional feel of like timelessness, and with the light and everything coming together, the rule of third really going well. It is just a masterpiece if you look into it. Yet you see that there is nothing about wide angle incoming charging at you, nothing. But you just look at a photo like this, right? And especially like the one in the very far left, right, walking, striving back, trying to catch up with the group, right, and then and then also in the middle there's the baby following the probably the mother. It's just the whole family dynamics is right there, and then you see some small ones, and then you see a big one in the distance. So it's all this positioning and sizing makes this image just I never get tired to look at that photo. And I hope that this kind of brings you to another perspective in photography, is just to go against the common rule of what you see, and try to let your creativity runs wild, and and then you can get something like that. Like Federico was just mentioned that he got really low into this because one common problem is the horizon will cross over the head of the elephant if he didn't get that low in the ground. And also he realized that for this sport, right, in Africa, a lot of the places, the background can be really distracting, but in this place, right, it's almost like a distance you can see to the infinity, right? So Federico already knew that this is a good spot, but then he's just waiting and waiting for this to come up, so that all this almost like silhouette, right, in the further area can show up like this. Otherwise, it would not happen. And also, probably it's a cloudy day, so that the cloud also helps to separate the elephant from that. So there's just tons of element to look at. I hope I didn't make these things up, Federico, and I'm just too excited.
No, absolutely right.
Yeah,
absolutely right.
Yeah. So Katie just asked, like, what is the focus point in this picture? Like, which one do you want people to look at? Or you just kind of want to have this grand landscape to make people feel about the numbers, right?
Yeah. The elephants this is taken actually with quite a wide lens. I think it's a 24-70, so it wasn't too far from the elephants. It's not a telephoto lens, so the elephants are rolling focus, and the idea is just that repetition of shape, and so there isn't. It's just as you say the 3-dimensionality with the biggest ones first, and then you look, and you keep looking down, and you see more elephants. But once you see big, they're rolling focus because it's a wide lens, so the depth of field is quite big. So I could get all of them in focus, even though they were at different distances.
So do you put your hand really low from the door so that to get this low angle, and you just look at like the viewfinder, the LCD flipping up, or like how do you do that?
Well, this was taken in the time when there was no LCD, no flipping LCD yet.
Mm-hmm.
So this was taken with going down with the head
Uh-huh.
and with the right angle viewer. That's a very useful. It's still because the LCD, not the autofocus is not very good sometimes. So sometimes you miss shots. But I've seen that now new cameras are getting better at that. So that's another story. But in these ones, most of my elephants images are taken with the right angle viewer. So I'm looking down. I'm not breaking my neck trying to look into the viewfinder, but I'm just putting the camera down and looking basically towards the ground, and then I can see into the right angle what the camera is pointing at.
I see. Yeah, I'm just kind of showing the other photo with the higher angle because Bob just asked about the lower. So you showed this one with the higher angle, you see the texture of the dry lake, right? And then it's a completely different feeling, which is really, pretty amazing, right? Both of them, you took it from the car, but from moving up to moving down, you get like this one is
Changes
almost like,
completely.
yeah, on the Earth's surface, right? You really see the Earth, right? The feeling of it. And,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's it's interesting to compare these two images taken in the same place, more or less of the same situation, elephants walking, but we can see how different the two images are. And in these ones, from when you take them at a higher level, you give a much stronger sense of space, of course. And again, this is taken from a relatively short distance away from the elephant, so I think it's another 2470 mm. And the main thing here is the leading line. So I found a leading line, and I waited for the elephants to get to that line in order for the eye to be accompanied to the elephants. This is actually a trail of elephants or zebras. They tend to follow trails, so they leave these tracks on the ground as they walk. So that you can find many in this lake. You can find many here, for example, on the right. You can see there is a elephant footprints. This elephant must have walked when the lake was still a bit wet, so he left his big foot into the surface. So you can see that the surface is a bit depressed.
Yeah.
That's totally different.
Yeah, I mean,
For this one, the peculiarity is, if you remember, as you were saying, the horizon behind the elephant is a big challenge. So for this one, I had to go stand, to pop out of the roof and try to go as high as possible to frame the elephants within the horizon. That was the main thing, because if that horizon had been overlapping with the elephant's back, the picture would have been confused and would have not been so direct. It would have been an element of overlapping, which would have caused confusion. So that's why I went as high as possible to make sure that the elephants were entirely within the horizon, to avoid conflict of conflicting lines, conflicting elements. This is a very strong thing that in these wide images is very important to consider. Avoid conflicting elements, avoid subject being impacted by something either in front, obviously, because you don't want a tree in front of your subject, but even behind, to make kind of a frame for your subject, a clean frame, so that the subject can be fully highlighted and fully visible without obstructions in front and behind.
Yeah,
and so that it can almost.
This is super important, and I kept telling my clients and students about the horizon, and we have to pay attention. And a lot of the time, they may not be aware. And so far, I've only seen not a lot of photographers paying attention. I've talked to like Paul McKinsey, Charles Glasser. They are all very aware of the horizon, and I can see that you are the master of that. And when people look at a photo like this, they might not realize how much hard work you have to put in. First, you have to get really, really high to get rid of the horizon distraction, and then you have to wait for the moment with the leading line pointing right at the elephant and get the shot, right? And then you have to position yourself where the cloud and everything comes together. You have to leave the space in the front so that you have some space for the elephant to walk to. Everything. People will think that the elephant walk very slowly and it should be an easy shot. But I bet over that time you are really in your full gear, right? Getting all your engine running
Sure,
to nail
absolutely.
that.
It's really,
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes, yeah. It's
Yeah.
once you see that, once you're in such a place with such magnificent subjects, then you start thinking and so what to do, where do I go, left, right, angle, also choosing the angle of light. In this case, I'm a bit backlit to make them even more to make them kind of silhouetted against the background. Although there is no light, but there's still, even if there's no sun, the sun behind the clouds still brings a bit of light, and that's why you have these elephants kind of showing up quite dark against the bright background, because I'm kind of shooting into the light. If I had gone the other way, there would have been much less contrast between the elephant and the soil. So the image would have not been so strong. Yeah. So all these things you have to consider, and as the elephants move, and they move slowly, but one step of an elephant is like 4 hours. So they do actually, when it seems like they're going slowly, but they
were fast.
they can cover a
we were moving non-stop,
distance.
chasing, like trying to keep up with them. And I'm so glad you mentioned about the shooting into an overcast day while the sun is still behind, because a lot of people think that overcast is just overcast and it's the same. And for me, I don't know, I haven't told you, but I also love to shoot when the sun is actually behind the cloud, but we are shooting towards the sun, and then you have this really nice rim light, but then the front is also with very nice detail.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is actually sometimes better than just direct backlit and some. It's all very interesting. I'm so glad we mentioned about it.